Hey everybody, Bill Sky, the C guy, and what we're going to talk about today is we're going to talk about getting keyboard input from the user. Now some of these skills are also transferable over to file input and output, actually specifically input. But we're going to do keyboard input today because this is normally how you'll do stuff just to test your code, and then maybe you'll move on to files. So let's just get right into the coding. Okay, so I've got my Linux up here, and everything I'm going to do today is also Windows and Mac OS compatible. So I like just Linux just because it's a more dynamic or more it's just a better development environment in my experience. And that's arguable. People might complain and say, "Oh, you're full of baloney," but let's just move on. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to do a number of things here. First thing we're going to do is we're going to create. We're just going to get a standard string. So we're going to input a string. Now to input a string or a C string in C++, you first of all need to have a variable, which I'm sure you understand. So I'm going to create a thing called, I don't know, my name, and I'm going to make it 32 in size. Now remember, when you're creating variables like this, you're going to want to make sure you create it big enough. You create the C string big enough to also include that \0, that null terminated character. Very, very important for that. And also the \n, which is the enter key. So let's go ahead and input that string. Now, we're just going to use the scanf. Now there is a better, I believe it's on Windows, Visual C, you're going to use the scanf_s. That's a more secure Windows scanf. On Linux and Mac OS, it's okay to use scanf. I don't even think that there's a scanf_s for those operating systems. I could actually be wrong on that, but that's what I believe. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the scanf function, and just like on printf, you're going to specify the type of data that you're reading in. So you have to put in the format string first, and I'm going to say %. And it's always a good idea to use the size of the string as well. So I'm going to say it's 32. That means it's not going to overflow the buffer at all. So 32s. So it's going to be 32 character strings, and then you specify the variable name. Now, for C strings, you just use the variable name in this case, my name, and but for integers and for other type of variables like doubles and floats, you want to use the address of it, because the scanf function takes the address of the string or the address of the data where you're going to be putting the data into from the keyboard. Now, why don't we do that with C strings is because a C string is an array name without square brackets is automatically an address. So that's why we don't have to do that. If this was an integer, which we'll see later, we'll put the dereference character in there. But for right now, let's just do this. And then I'm going to say printf, you entered. We're going to say %s \n, my name. Now, if you're not sure what this printf is, go ahead and take a look at my previous 2 videos in C where I talk about printing data out to the standard out. All right, so let's go ahead and make this. All right, pretty good. And let's go ahead and run it. Okay, welcome to C. Now, notice we don't have any kind of a prompt there. I just absolutely hate that. So I'm going to Control C, and I'm going to immediately put a printf here. Please enter your name. And I'm not going to put a \n in there. I'm not going to put that in the printf because I don't want to go to the next line to actually do that. So let's go ahead and save and build that. And then let's run it. There we go. So please enter your name. So I'm going to say Bill Sky. And it says you entered Bill Sky. Awesome. Now let's do this. And let's put some spaces in it. Now you're going to see some differences here. So I'm going to say Bill Sky, the C guy. And we have a little bit of a problem, is that scanf does not go past a space when you're reading a string or any other data type. So it's only printing out Bill. So if you're going to have spaces in your string that the user is going to be entering, you don't want to use that. You want to use something different. Now, I'm going to go ahead and copy this, and I'm going to put a little comment here. input a string with spaces. And let's go ahead. And this time, instead of scanf, what we're going to use, a thing called fgetS. And that's a different function. And what the function does things a little bit differently. You specify the variable name, you specify the length. And it's, by the way, it's never a good idea to use literals. You should always have a constant there. So we're going to say that, and then we're going to say we want to get it from standard input. And standard input is the keyboard. Okay, so fgetS is a little bit different. So let's go ahead and make this and run it. Okay, I'll say Bill Sky, C guy, and you notice it says Bill. Well, okay, we have a problem here. Well, why didn't it allow me to enter? It didn't allow me to enter anything. It's almost as if it pressed the enter key. But take a look at what it printed. It printed Sky the C guy. Well, what happened there? Well, because when I typed in Bill Sky the C guy, it saw that space. It said, okay, I'm going to stop right here, and I'm going to leave Sky the C guy, and even the space for that matter, I'm going to leave that in the standard in keyboard buffer. And so when I asked it to do an fgetS, it said, oh, there's already data in the standard in keyboard buffer. There's also the enter key. I'm just going to use that. And it didn't even give me the option to do that. It didn't even give me the option to enter in any data. And it just took what was ever in the keyboard buffer, in the standard in buffer, and it used that. So we're going to see this a lot with numbers, when we enter in numbers. For right now, let's just go ahead and comment all this out. I think there's a faster way to do that, just so I can show you how fgetS works. And then we're going to talk about how to clear the keyboard buffer very soon. Okay, so let's try it now. Now, it's not going to, I have the scanf commented out, so we're not going to use that. So I'm going to say Bill Sky the C guy. And you can see that it took the whole thing. It took the entire Bill Sky the C guy, including the spaces and the enter key, and everything's great. Okay, so again, we've got a little bit of an issue here with using scanf and fgetS, but we're also going to have that problem with scanf, following scanfs that use that input numbers, and that's the next thing I want to do. So let's go ahead and let's say input an integer. So how do we input an integer? Well, again, the first thing you need is your integer. So I'm going to say int and int. And I always like to initialize my variables. So I'm going to say printf, now please enter an integer. And I'm going to say get or scanf. And we have to specify the integer data type, which is a %d. And where are we going to put it? We're going to put it into an int. Now, some of you may already know this, are screaming, "Oh my God, there's a mistake in this code." Well, you're right. I want to actually build it and see the mistake. So the mistake here is that it's looking for an integer pointer. You can see it right here, an integer pointer, but argument 2 is a type int. So you're going to need the address of the integer. So we're going to put an ampersand in front there. And there it is. And now let's go ahead and run this. So I'm just going to quickly go through that. Now please enter integer 123. Now we didn't do anything with that integer, so let's go ahead and print it. You entered %d. And that's one thing I really am not crazy about with printf and scanf, is that printf doesn't use addresses, it uses the actual variable. And scanf uses addresses. I wish that was consistent, but you know, compatibilities. Okay, 1, 2, 3, and there we go. So you entered 1, 2, 3. That's awesome. It worked great. But here's the problem with scanf and entering numbers. I'm going to now have them enter that number again. So I'm going to just copy and paste this. I'm going to say again. And we're going to reproduce that problem that I had with the very first one where we did a scanf of the name that had spaces in it. So let's go ahead and make this. And you're going to see the problem here. And you already saw it. So now I'm going to type in 1, 2, 3, and I accidentally press the A key before I type 4, 5. You've all done it, right? You've typed in a number, or you've typed in even a string, and you've typed in something you didn't mean to type. It happens. Human beings are human beings, and we make mistakes. So what happens here, it saw the 1, 2, 3, it put that into our integer, 1, 2, 3, then it said, now please enter an integer again, and it saw the A. It saw this A right here. That I have highlighted 3A, but it saw that A. It said, oh, that's not an integer, but there's something in the standard in keyboard buffer. So I'm going to try to put that A into the variable again, but A is not an integer, so it left everything inside the keyboard buffer. And here's the problem with this. If I put this in a while loop, and I'm going to use a while true just so I can show this. So what this while loop should do is it should go forever. It should have me type in an integer every single time. But because I type in an invalid integer, I want you to watch what happens. It's crazy. And what did I do? Oh, we don't have true. So I'm just going to say while 1. So you could do that in C++. There's also a way to do it in C. You can see my previous videos on that. So let's go ahead and run this. Okay, Bill. Now, please enter your integer. I'm going to put 1, 2, 3. All right, great. You entered 1, 2, 3. I'm going to put 4, 5, 6, 7. Looks great. Now I'm going to do that mistake where I accidentally typed in letter A. We are in an infinite loop. Big problem, right? Infinite loop, your worst enemy just about in writing program. So how do you fix this problem? Well, whenever you have the user enter any type of a number, in C++ you could use the cin, the kin.ignore, but in C++ there really isn't anything like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do something that some people might argue is a bad way of doing it, but it's not, and it's also compatible across all of the operating systems. Windows, Linux, Mac OS, it's just compatible. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say, let me see. Let me make sure I got this right. So I'm going to use the fgetS, kind of like what we did up here. And I'm just going to use some C string. I could create my own, like I could come up here. The user is they're never going to type in 512 bytes of data. So I could create a char, I don't know, dummy char of 512. And I'm just going to say fgetS, and I'm going to say dummy char 512 standard in. Now, what is this doing? This is saying take what's ever left inside of the keyboard buffer, inside of the stdin buffer, and put it in dummy char. And then you can interrogate it later. And again, I've tried this on Linux, Windows, Mac OS. It all seems to work. Even Visual C, it always seems to work, and it eliminates the problem. Now, there's another way you could do this. You could create a function that goes one character at a time, which we're going to talk about in a moment. One character at a time, reads one character out of the keyboard buffer at a time. So you could write a function to do that. But this is a really quick and easy way of doing it that's compatible across operating systems. And I haven't been able to find out when fgetS actually was added to the language, but it was before 2012. So if you're writing a new program, this isn't a problem. If you're writing a really old C program that was written in in the 1980s or the 1990s, you might not have fget_s. Again, I haven't been able to find out when it was added to the language, but it was pretty far back. So let's go ahead and make sure we build this. Oh, we already did. And now let's run it. Okay. And now let's enter an integer. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, this is looking good. 1, 2, 3, A, 4, 5, 6. And you can see what happened was I don't have an infinite loop anymore. What's happened is that it took the 1, 2, 3, put it into the integer, which you can see down here. And because A is not a number, it just stopped putting it into the integer variable, which is a good thing. And then our fget_s to dummy char 512 standard in, it read the rest of it. It basically cleared the standard in buffer, and the program didn't die. Now, this could actually be a problem if you actually mean the user to type multiple values, which I don't recommend, but you can do that. It may not work correctly, but here's the thing, is that the program didn't die. It didn't get into an infinite loop. And as far as I'm concerned, an infinite loop is the ultimate death of a program. So it's always a good idea to clear the buffer. Now, if you look at my user input on C++ video, how would you do this in C++? You'd say kin.ignore, and you'd give it some large number, and ignore up to and including the \n or 512 bytes. You might want to use this thing, int_max, which is really the way you should do it. And you can take a look at that video. So this is pretty much the same as this, except we don't have that int_max. So this is just going to read everything in the keyboard buffer and clear it out. Clear it out so you don't have that problem. So when in college, at the classes I taught on C and C++, I would say do both of those. You have to do both of those whenever you ask the user to type in a numeric value, because they're going to screw up. At some point, you're going to have some users going to type an invalid value, and now your program is going to be infinite looping. So you definitely want to do something like that. Okay, so we went through inputting a string, inputting an integer. Now let's do the next one. Let's input a float. Now, floating point, it's done pretty much the same. I have to create my floating point. Let's do a double. So I'm going to say double a double equals 0. Again, the .00 isn't needed, but I like to put it in there. So let's input a float. And let's actually do it in the while loop, just so we can see how that fix worked. And I'm going to comment out the fget_s. Okay. So please enter a float. And we're going to say a float, or a double. I believe it was a double. Let's double check that. Oh, sorry for the pun. Yep, it is a double. Okay. And let's just say a double. And again, we commented out the fget_s so just so I could show you. Okay, what did we do? Oh, so I still have the %d in there. You don't want to say %d on a float. You want to say %f. And that's a floating point. And that's good for floating point or floats as well as doubles. And did I save it? Oh, nope, that was up here. There we go. It's good. I needed to change it in both places. Okay, let's see what we've got here. It says %f expects argument type float, but argument 2 has a type of double. So if I go ahead and I change, and I'm really glad that I made that error. If I go ahead and change this to float, that program should go away, or that error should go away. So let's build it. Yep, went away fine. Let's go ahead and run it. Oh, we have that while loop going, and I didn't put any kind of an exit. So let's go ahead and comment out this while loop. I could comment out the whole thing, but I'm just going to comment out the loop. Okay, now please enter a floating point number, 103.45. Okay, that's good. 1, 2, 3, A dot 4, 5. And we have our infinite loop again. So again, this is why this fget_s is so important. Let's go ahead and build this now and test it again after that small little change. Okay, good. So our floating point is working. However, the first problem was a double. I showed you a floating point. The %f doesn't really work for doubles. So how do we do a double? So let's go ahead and change this back to a double. Build it, and we should actually get a build error. And it depends upon the compiler you're using. I haven't tested this on Visual C. You might not get that error. But you might not get that error. If you want to specify a double, you would specify %lf. That is a long floating point. Let's go ahead and save and build that. And I didn't make it, I just compiled it. So there we go. So let's build it, and now let's run it. All right, 1, 4, 5. All right, works great. Looks good. And we're stuck, so I'm going to press Control-C to get out. So long float. Now, can you put the LF down here? I don't know. Let's try it out. I do know, but it's always a good idea to try things out, learn on your own. Yep, worked fine. So you could also say long float there as well. Okay, what about getting a single character? What if I want to get a single character? And I was mentioning that earlier. What if I wanted to grab a single character? Well, you can use the scanf, but you would say %c. So I'm going to put a char here. Now, because this is not an array, like my name was an array, by simply sending that variable to scanf, you'll get a compiler error, and I will actually show you that. So let's comment out our while loop. And that's the fifth thing I want to do today. Input a single char. So I'm going to say printf, please enter your middle initial. And I'm going to say scanf. And what we're going to do is we're going to say %c for single character. I'm going to say middle initial. And I'm going to say printf, you entered %c. And let's see how that works. Now I I did that. Let's put this integer code in here. Let's move that up there. Let's do it in order in which we were doing this program. And let's go ahead and make this. Okay, we still have a problem. Well, actually, let's make sure I did it. Oh, it's my initial. That was it. It was a middle initial. It was my initial. So let's go ahead and put my initial there. It's still going to be a problem, but for a different reason. Okay, so %c expects an argument of type char asterisk, but argument 2 is a type of int because a char is an int. So what we want to do is, because a char variable is not a pointer to the char, it's actually a variable, so it's passed by value. So we're going to go ahead and put ampersand my initial in there, make this, and there we go. Let's try it out. And the middle initial of k. And you can see that you entered k. So I believe that's all I wanted to go through today in this video. Let me double check. Oh, well, there's one other thing I want to talk about, and that's ignoring data up to a certain. So remember, I typed in a character, but what if the user types something in like they don't understand what they're typing in? Maybe they thought they were supposed to type their user ID, and then they look at it like, wait a minute, they just asked for the number, for a number, and then I'm going to go ahead and just type the number and press enter. I would like to ignore everything before it. Or what if the user types spaces? and you want to ignore everything up to but not including the number. And let's go with that scenario. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, and I think I have, let's take a look. Oh, it's an int. Okay, so I'm going to say printf. And before that, that's the sixth thing we want to do. Ignore preceding, I don't know, characters. So I'm going to say it's printf, please enter an integer. Yes, again. Put a space there. I'm going to say scanf. Now, if I say %d, let's see what happens. Printf, you entered, and let's say %d. Oh, I forgot a semicolon right there. Please enter initial, let's say K. Please enter integer, yes, again. So I'm going to type space, 1, 2, 3. And it seemed to work, but what if I do this? Well, it seemed to get the 1, 2, 3. I'm not sure. I guess, yeah, I'm not. Well, maybe the 1, 2, 3 was the previous integer value. Ah. So let's go ahead and move into an int 0 just to see. Just to see if what we're seeing is actually working, which I don't believe it is. Or we could comment out all the code above it. You can see it has a value of 0 because ABC is not a number. Let's see if that works with spaces. It worked with spaces. It seemed to ignore all the spaces up to the 1 and then it put the 1, 2, 3 in there. But it didn't work with the letters in front. So what you can do is you can say in this format, I want to ignore all characters. And the way that you do that, you say %*s. That's what that *s means. Anything that is non-numeric up to the integer that they're inputting, anything that's non-numeric should be ignored. That's what that's what the asterisk does. So you don't even have to specify a variable at the end of the scanf. So let's go ahead and try that out. All right, let's do the same thing. Okay, please enter an integer yet again. And I'm going to say A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, 1, 2, 3. And I'm pressing enter. Let's say 1, 2, 3. It's interesting how that worked. I've seen this work before. Let's put in a space. This is actually documented in the language, but it's interesting. It didn't quite work. Maybe there has to be a space in between it. Well, that worked because I had a space between the A, B, C, D, E, F, G and the 1, 2, 3. Let's test it again. Well, you notice I didn't put a space in between the A, B, C, D, E, F, G, 1, 2, 3, so you continue to have that problem. So it might be a good idea on here to go one character at a time in this case. As you can see in C and C++, it really doesn't have any data validation features. And the reason why that %*s worked is that without the space is that it took this entire thing as the single string and it didn't put it in anything. That's what the asterisk does. It doesn't put in anything. So every time I pressed enter, it said, okay, I'm waiting for the %D, I'm waiting for the %D, I'm waiting for the %D. And then when I put in the %D, which is the 1, 2, 3, it took it. So that %** is pretty good if you know that they're not going to enter in, if they are going to enter in a space after the string. It's better if you're reading in a file, but that is something that you could use for ignoring everything before a number, as long as there's a space there. All right, so that's simple user input from standard in, a couple of different things. We did strings, we did a single char, we did floats, we did doubles. I showed you how to clear out the standard in buffer. Again, you could write a program to do that or a function to do that, which you might do in the follow-on video on how to do functions for processing user input. But until then, hope to see you at our next video.